Welcome to a special edition, one-off video of an old autocar favourite. It's called Will It Drift? And today I want to explore the differences between an open and a locked rear differential. But first, an introduction to the two cars that I would like to use. You joined me inside my workshop. Now, a few years ago, a colleague of mine was leaving autocar. I don't know why you'd do that, but he was. And he said, look, lads, I've got two boxes of radio control gubbins underneath my desk. None of it works. I don't know what to do with it. I'm just going to throw it away unless somebody thinks they can save it. And I thought, well, you never know when you might be stuck at home. There's a zombie apocalypse going on outside. That day has come. Here is the world's least glamorous unboxing video. It's more of a sort of barn find radio control video, if you like. Two Tamiya SRB chassis. It's quite a simple thing, isn't it? Lovely proportions, really cool proportions. It's got this plastic reinforced, fibre reinforced plastic thing at the front, double wishbones with a sort of torsion spring that goes across both of them, and then telescopic dampers I'll come to in a moment. At the back it's got a wishbone, there's no rear differential, and the rear springing is done by this torsion bar over here. So as you do it, as you compress that, it flexes that bar and gives you the springing. One has a Ford Ranger body. There's cracks on the top and stuff, but I think if I am clever, I could probably find a way to put it back together and get it into presentable condition. But anyway, I'm going to strip down one of them and rebuild it and see how it goes. What I'm going to do next is just take the motor out and see how it looks. Apparently there's always a little bit of play from what I read online. There's always a little bit of play in these brass UJs. Good news is everything is really clean, like really clean. Beautiful, isn't it? Look at that. Bollocks. Well, I know it's old, but there's some clever stuff going on here, right? Because if you put on this cover, that helps locate the motor, and then as you screw it down, it also pushes the motor through, which leaves enough of the spindle out that you can then get the grub screw on. Okay, so that is the chassis largely back together. The electrical bay has got to go back in it. First of all, I've got to pop the dampers back in. So here's a clever thing. That is the low post that secures the buggy bodywork. But realising that you might want two different bodies on the same car, or realising that it might package a different body that required a taller post, instead of having a different sub-assembly for each kit for the bodywork, Tamiya just supply presumably this with the body, or this extension with the Ford Ranger kit, and it just slips over the normal post to work. I mean, that's the sort of intelligent manufacturing and design and processing that the Japanese car industry was particularly good at, and remains particularly good at. Right, that is the suspension front and rear complete. The steering isn't in yet because I want the electronics tray in first. The rear suspension is really stiff. That's really firm. I don't think there's going to be much give in that. But anyway, next let's get the electronics tray in, and then I can get the steering in at the same time. I've just given this a bit of a clean off. The paint's not bad, but it's not brilliant. I think clearly the body was blue when it arrived, and it's been given a yellow coating, and it's not perfect. So what I need to do is find some bits of plastic that I can put underneath this, because I think just gluing it on its own is not going to be strong enough. I could do with reinforcing it on the inside with a couple of pieces of plastic. I may even try and drop a piece of plastic in there to fill that hole, because that would give it a little bit extra rigidity too. Same at the front, and then work out how that grille goes on. Right, so I sanded back the grey primer down to as smooth as I can with a sort of 1200 grit, and I'm just going to go and put this top coat of brown on, see how it looks. Still haven't decided whether to do the deck black, as in, you know, like a deck cover, TPC really. I've done that black for now, which looks okay, but would look better with the right amount of silver on it, I think. So what I'm going to do is dry brush some silver on to most of it and put actual silver in where the light should be. That then was the 1981 Tamiya Ford F-150 Ranger. This one, in fact. But there is also a re-release of the 1984 Tamiya Grasshopper. Now, I will spare you the full build, it's on this time-lapse, but it takes about a day to put a Grasshopper together, and it's a faithful re-release of the 1984 original. Now, a bit like there only being 11 years between the first flights of the Lancaster and Vulcan aircraft, there's only 3 years between the launches of the F-150 Ranger and the Grasshopper, but the changes are huge. The F-150, running on Tamiya's old SRB chassis, uses a basic flat floor with an aluminium reinforcement, mostly metal for everything else, the gearbox, suspension, the works, as you'll have seen. Even the SRB chassis itself was only 2 years old when the F-150 arrived. And on that chassis had already come the Sand Scorcher, which is a Volkswagen Beetle, and the Rough Rider, which is a buggy. But in 1984 the Grasshopper arrived and looked like it was from a different era, with a purely injection moulded plastic chassis, gearbox components, suspension arms and more. It's lighter, pretty much as sturdy, and this bathtub style chassis, developed from a much simpler variant called the Holiday Buggy, effectively produced the template for Tamiya off-road buggies for years, if not decades, to come. This one has what they call a 380 motor. Now, ostensibly, that's less powerful than the 540 in the F-150. I forget the precise specification differences between the two. But let's not forget also, the F-150 is old. More than anything, what I'd like to investigate is the effect of its open differential. Now, I mean, as you'll know, that allows the rear wheels to travel at different speeds to each other, which allows a car to turn more easily, but doesn't necessarily make it oversteer. The F-150 has a spool rear differential. So that means the rear tyres spin at exactly the same speed. Now that can limit a car's willingness to turn, but it can also, once the wheels are spinning, kick the tail wide and keep it there. So the question is very, very simple. As always, it is, will it drift? Right, I hope you forgive the selfie stick nature of this part of the video, but let's see how these cars cope. There we go. Is that in? That's in. Let's see how these cars cope with a bit of attempted donutting. Right, old school RC fans, look at that. Acom's Techniplus, right down to an actual crystal. Alright, and okay, we're on. Right, let's see how the Ranger gets on. Now, I would say that with an array of donuts and spin turns, the F-150 definitely, with a locked rear differential, even despite its age and despite its height and despite its knackered tyres and worn out motor and the fact that I put it back together, mean that it officially will drift. Right, lighter, newer, theoretically better. Let's see if the Grasshopper will drift. Well, maybe I have learned something, and that is that even though the buggy is newer, better, faster, lighter, stronger, all of those things, the old Stager with its rear wheels locked together is easier to send around in small circles, which is all slightly pointless, I know, but it is just what keeps me going through the day, this sort of thing. Now, if it is the sort of thing that could keep you going through the days as well, I am contractually obliged to say that we are autocar.co.uk. We're in newsagents since 1895. Every Wednesday you will find us on YouTube, where you could like, subscribe, turn on post notifications, and you'll never miss one. They call that a call to action. I'm at Matty_Pryor on Twitter, or AutocarMatt on Instagram, and I hope to see you on one of those or more of those outlets very soon. Meantime, have a brilliant rest of the weekend, and thank you very much for joining me in my childish capers.